I didn't flinch. I didn't make a sound. I just looked at him, my daughter's husband, standing there in his good wool coat, the one she probably picked out for him. And I nodded, the way you nod at someone you already know everything about. He didn't know that, of course. That was his first mistake. My name is not important. What matters is that I am 67 years old. I was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and I have spent the better part of 4 decades watching people underestimate quiet women. I never thought I would one day be one of them. The quiet woman, I mean. The one everyone forgets to worry about. My daughter Adrian was 34 when she died. She had her father's eyes and my stubbornness, and a laugh that could fill a room so completely there was no space left for anything sad. She was a software architect at a firm in Calgary, built systems for energy companies, the kind of work I never fully understood but watched her love with my whole heart. She had a condo on the 18th floor with a view of the Bow River. She had $1.4 million in registered accounts, company shares, and a life insurance policy her employer had provided. She had everything ahead of her. And then, 11 months ago, she had a stroke. At 34. No prior history. No warning. She was gone in 72 hours. I drove from Thunder Bay to Calgary in 2 days. I don't remember most of that drive. I remember a Tim Hortons somewhere outside Winnipeg, and I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands ached for a week afterward. I remember arriving at the hospital and my son-in-law, her husband of 3 years, the man I had never quite been able to warm to, meeting me in the corridor with his arms out, his eyes red, saying, "She's already gone, Irene. I'm so sorry. She's gone." I let him hold me because I didn't know what else to do. His name was Crispin Alderholt. He was 38, worked in commercial real estate, had smooth hands and a confident handshake, and the particular kind of charm that makes people feel chosen when he remembered their name. Adrian had loved him completely. I had tried. I had told myself my unease was just the ordinary friction between a mother and the man who took her daughter's attention. I had told myself I was being unfair. I told myself that for 3 years. The funeral was held at a church in the Mission neighborhood of Calgary, a place Adrienne had attended occasionally, more for the community than the doctrine. She would have appreciated that detail. She appreciated nuance in everything. I arrived early. I sat in the front pew and held the order of service and read her name over and over, Adrienne Louise Mackay Thorne, until it stopped looking like a name and started looking like something else entirely. A fact. An irreversible fact. People filed in, colleagues from her firm, neighbors, university friends I recognized from photographs. Her father's sister drove up from Lethbridge. My best friend since nursing school, a woman who has known me longer than anyone alive, sat beside me and held my hand and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. Crispin sat beside me too, on my other side. He greeted people across me, leaning forward, shaking hands, accepting condolences with the particular grace of someone who had perhaps rehearsed. At one point he whispered to someone behind us. I couldn't hear the words, only the low, easy murmur of his voice, and whatever he said made the other person laugh softly. I noticed that. At the reception after the burial, held at a hall Crispin had booked in Kensington, I was standing near the window with a cup of tea I hadn't touched when a man I didn't recognize approached me. He was perhaps 45, well-dressed, with the deliberate posture of someone who spent money on his clothes. He introduced himself. He said he was a colleague of Crispin's, a business partner of sorts. Adrian was remarkable, he said. We were all very fond of her. I thanked him. Then he leaned slightly closer, not aggressively, just enough. And he said, in a voice pitched for only me, Crispin is going to need good people around him now. He's been under a lot of pressure. Some of the arrangements, the financial side of things, he's going to need to move quickly. I hope you'll support him. I looked at this man, I looked at his cufflinks and his easy smile and the careful way he'd chosen those words. I said, "Is that right?" Not a question, just those 3 words. He smiled again and excused himself to get another drink. And I stood there at that window holding my cold tea, and something settled in my chest like a stone dropping into still water. It wasn't grief. I was already full of grief. This was something else. I had been a registered nurse for 31 years. I worked in palliative care for the last 18 of those years. I have sat beside hundreds of people in the last weeks and months and days of their lives. I have seen what fear looks like, and what peace looks like, and what guilt looks like when someone thinks they are too tired to hide it anymore. I know how to read a room. I know how to read a face. Something was wrong. My daughter had been young and healthy. She ran half marathons. She ate carefully, slept enough, managed her stress. The neurologist in Calgary had called her stroke cryptogenic, meaning no identified cause. That happens. Young people have strokes without explanation. I knew that. But I also knew my daughter called me every Sunday without fail, and the last 3 Sundays before she died, she had seemed distracted. Not sad, not frightened, just somewhere else. Like a part of her attention was on a problem she was working through privately. When I asked her once, she said, "Just work stuff, Mum. You know how it gets." I had accepted that. I regretted accepting that every day. After the reception, I went back to Adrian's condo. Crispin had offered me the guest room and I had accepted, partly because I had nowhere else to stay and partly because I wanted to be somewhere that still smelled like her. The condo was beautiful. She had furnished it with care. There were plants she'd kept alive for years, books organized by color on a shelf, which I had teased her about, impractical, and a small framed print in the kitchen that said enough in lowercase letters. I had given her that print when she graduated from university. I sat in her kitchen on the first night and cried until I was empty. Crispin gave me space. He was out often. Meetings, he said, things that needed handling. This struck me as slightly off for a man newly widowed, but I told myself people grieved differently. I made myself tea and I sat with her things and I breathed. On the 3rd day, I started to look. I'm not sure what I was looking for exactly. I just knew that I couldn't leave without understanding what had happened in the last months of my daughter's life. I knew her. She wouldn't have been distracted by ordinary work stress. She had managed high-pressure projects for years without losing that particular quality of full presence she always had on our Sunday calls. Something had been troubling her. Her home office was neat. She'd been methodical by nature. I went through her desk slowly and carefully, the way I used to go through files at the hospital, with respect, with attention, without rushing. Most of it was unremarkable. Printer cartridges, a drawer of good pens, sticky notes in her handwriting with shorthand I couldn't decipher. And then, in the back of the bottom drawer, inside a manila folder labeled Miss Kanj 2 2024, I found a printed email thread. She had printed it, which meant she had wanted a physical copy she could hold, something that couldn't be deleted remotely. I sat down on the floor of her office and I read it. It took me 3 readings to fully understand what I was looking at. The emails were between Adrian and a lawyer, not the family lawyer she and Crispin shared, but someone else, a woman in Edmonton, contacted privately. Adrian had been asking questions about the beneficiary designations on her RRSP and life insurance policy. She had also been asking questions about a change to her will that she did not remember authorizing. The lawyer's response was measured and careful. She said the change appeared to have been made via Adrian's online account 14 months prior. She listed what had been amended: the primary beneficiary on the life insurance policy, which had originally been her estate, to be distributed according to her will, with a portion directed to me and a portion to a children's literacy charity she supported, had been changed to Crispin directly. A change that, if Adrian had not made it herself, would have required someone with access to her login credentials. The last email in the thread was Adrian's reply. She wrote, "I did not make this change. I want to understand how this happened before I decide on next steps. Please do not contact my husband about this. That was dated 6 weeks before her death. I sat on the floor of her office for a long time. Then I stood up. I put the folder back exactly where I had found it. I washed my face in her bathroom, made myself tea, and sat at her kitchen table. I thought about Crispin's colleague at the reception. He's going to need to move quickly. I thought about the way Crispin had known exactly which funeral home to call within hours of her death, exactly which lawyer to contact about the estate. The speed that had seemed like competence, the competence that had seemed like love. I thought about my daughter printing an email thread and hiding it in a drawer. She had found something. She hadn't yet decided what to do. And then she had died. I did not sleep that night. In the morning, I told Crispin I needed to extend my stay in Calgary for a few more weeks. I said I wasn't ready to go home, which was true, and I rented a small furnished apartment in Bridgeland near the river with a view of the walking path she had used on her morning runs. I made a list. First, I contacted a lawyer of my own, not in Calgary. I called a firm in Edmonton, a different one from Adrienne's lawyer, because I didn't want to risk anything getting back to anyone. I explained the situation as plainly as I could. The lawyer, a methodical woman who asked good questions, told me that if there was evidence of unauthorized account access or beneficiary fraud, this was a matter for both civil litigation and potentially the RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit. She used the phrase potentially carefully. She told me what I would need. Second, I contacted Adrienne's firm. I asked to speak with her direct manager, a man I had met once at a company dinner. I told him I was going through some of my daughter's affairs and had come across some financial discrepancies I was trying to understand. He was kind and careful. He told me Adrienne had flagged some concerns to HR about 6 weeks before her death. She had been worried about unauthorized access to some of her personal digital accounts and had asked the firm's IT security team for advice. He had assumed it was a phishing concern. Standard. It hadn't been standard. Third, I went back to the condo on a day I knew Crispin would be out. He had given me a key during my stay, had not asked for it back. I used it. I felt no guilt about this. I looked carefully at her home office again, at her bookshelves, at the small filing cabinet in the corner she had kept locked. The key for that cabinet was on her keyring, which I had been given with the rest of her effects from the hospital. I opened it. Inside were two things. The first was a USB drive labeled in her handwriting, Open Wisconsin Z, which was the last name of the friend who'd sat beside me at the funeral, my friend from nursing school, a retired RCMP officer who had spent 15 years in financial crimes before her retirement. The second was a sealed envelope addressed to me. My name, Mum, in her handwriting. I stood there in her office and pressed the envelope against my chest and breathed. I did not open it there. I took both items, relocked the cabinet, left the condo, and walked to my car. I sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes. Then I drove to Bridgeland. My friend, I called her that night, drove down from Red Deer, where she had retired. She arrived at 9 o'clock with a bottle of wine she didn't open and a composure I have always admired. We sat at the small kitchen table and she looked at the USB drive in the envelope and she said, "Irene, tell me everything from the beginning." I did. She listened without interrupting, which was a skill she had honed over decades. When I finished, she said, "Okay, just that." Then she took out her laptop. The USB drive contained a folder of screenshots. Adrienne had been thorough and methodical, the way she was thorough and methodical about everything. There were screenshots of her online account access log showing logins from a device she didn't own, from an IP address she had traced to a Calgary address registered to a numbered company, a company she had noted in a separate document that listed Crispin Alderholt and one other individual as directors. There were screenshots of text messages she had photographed from her phone, messages to and from Crispin that she had evidently been keeping. In one exchange from 8 months before her death, Crispin wrote to someone whose contact name she had saved as CA Business, the same numbered company, about a timeline. The message was vague enough to be deniable. but he used the phrase once. Things are settled twice, and the second time he followed it with a dollar figure. $1.4 million, the exact amount of Adrian's registered accounts and insurance policy. My friend looked at the screen for a long time. Then she said in her quiet retirement voice that still held all the authority of her working years, "She built a case. She was building a case. She didn't get to finish it," I said. "No," she said. "But we can." I opened the envelope that night after my friend had gone to sleep in the second room. Adrian wrote the way she talked, directly, without sentimentality, with occasional dry humor at unexpected moments. She told me she had found the unauthorized changes to her accounts by accident while reviewing her RRSP for a rebalancing she did every year in January. She had not immediately told Crispin because she wanted to understand the scope of what she was looking at before she confronted anyone. She had been afraid to tell me because she didn't want to alarm me without certainty. She was still gathering certainty. She wrote, "I don't know if this is what it looks like. I'm still hoping there's an explanation I haven't thought of. But if you're reading this, Mum, it means I didn't get the chance to find out myself. And if that's true, I need you to know that you are the most capable person I have ever known. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Finish this for me. You'll know what to do." She signed it, "Your girl." I folded the letter and held it for a very long time. Then I dried my face and went to bed because I needed to be rested. There was work to do. My friend's contacts in the Financial Crimes Division of the RCMP were still active, still trusted. She made calls. I met over the following 3 weeks with investigators twice. I gave them everything: the USB drive, the printed email thread, the name of Adrian's private lawyer in Edmonton, the name of the IT security contact at her firm. I also gave them the business card that Crispin the colleague had pressed into my hand at the reception. I had kept it in my coat pocket. He had written his personal number on the back, in case, he said, I ever needed anything. The investigation took 4 months. I went home to Thunder Bay. I sold my car and bought a better one because mine was 15 years old and I'd been putting off the purchase. I planted a garden. I called my friend every few days. I spoke with the investigators when they needed me. I told no one else what was happening. Crispin called me twice during those months. The first call was warm and solicitous. Checking in on me, he said, hoping I was doing okay. The second call was shorter. He had apparently tried to access Adrian's filing cabinet and found it unlocked. He wanted to know if I'd gone back to the condo. I told him yes. I had picked up a few personal items she had left me. He paused. Then he said that was fine, of course. No problem at all. He never called again. In the spring, I received a call from the investigator I had been working with, a measured, plain-spoken man who gave information in the careful, unembellished way I had come to appreciate. He told me charges had been laid. Crispin Alderholt was charged with fraud over $5,000, breach of trust, and criminal harassment. The last related to digital account access without consent. His associate, the man with the cufflinks from the reception, was charged as a co-conspirator. The fraud charge related to the unauthorized beneficiary changes and the subsequent insurance claim Crispin had filed after Adrian's death. He had already received a partial disbursement of $340,000 before the investigation froze the remaining funds. And as for Adrian's death itself, the investigators told me that they had requested and received court authorization for a review of her medical records alongside the financial timeline. The reviewing physician noted that while the stroke remained cryptogenic, the circumstances warranted a formal inquest recommendation. I did not know what that would find, if anything. I was told I might not ever know with certainty. That is the hardest part to carry, the not knowing. What I do know is this. Crispin Alderholt pleaded guilty to fraud over $5,000 and breach of trust. His associate pleaded guilty to 1 count of fraud-related conspiracy. The frozen funds, over $1 million, were returned to Adrian's estate and distributed according to her original will. A portion came to me. A larger portion went to the literacy charity she had loved. Her firm set up a small annual bursary in her name for young women entering STEM fields. Crispin received a sentence of 4 years in federal custody and 3 years of supervised probation. His associate received 2 years less a day, served conditionally. The day I heard the sentences, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Thunder Bay with a cup of tea, the radio on low, the kind of early May afternoon where the light comes in sideways and makes everything look briefly golden. My friend called me before the investigator did. She had her own sources. She just said, "It's done, Irene." I said, "Okay." I sat there for a while after. I looked at the print I had brought back from Adrian's kitchen, the one I had given her when she graduated, the one that said enough in lowercase letters. I had taken it down from her wall after everything was settled and brought it home. It's on my kitchen wall now. I think about that word often. Enough. What is enough? Enough justice. Enough answers. Enough time to say what needed to be said. Adrian and I had 34 years. We had 34 years of Sunday phone calls and disagreements about how to organize bookshelves and a shared preference for too much cream in our coffee. It was not enough, but it was what we had, and I am grateful for every piece of it. She knew when she hid that USB drive and wrote my name on that envelope that I would know what to do. She was right. Not because I am extraordinary, because she knew me, and because some knowledge, the kind you carry in your hands after decades of work, the kind built out of watching and listening and refusing to look away, that knowledge does not retire. It does not grieve itself into uselessness. I used it for her when she could not use it for herself. That will have to be enough. There is a filing cabinet in my memory that I return to sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and the May light has finally gone. I open it, and I find my daughter's handwriting. I find the word enough on a kitchen wall. I find an envelope addressed to Mum in the careful, slightly slanted print she never lost from primary school. What I keep coming back to is this. Adrian did not panic. When she found what she found, the unauthorized changes, the accessed accounts, the evidence that the person sleeping beside her was quietly dismantling the life she had built, she did not fall apart. She got methodical. She got quiet. She built a record. She hid a USB drive for someone who would know what to do with it. And she wrote a letter to a woman she trusted completely. That is not ordinary. That takes a kind of steadiness that most people never have to find in themselves, because most people are never asked for it so starkly. I think about the choices Crispin made. Each one had a logic to it. Small, justifiable, one step at a time. Access her accounts, change a beneficiary, tell himself it was only paperwork, tell himself she would never notice, tell himself that if she did notice, he could manage it. That is how it works, I think. Not one enormous decision, but a series of small compromises, each one making the next one easier. Until you are standing at a reception in a good wool coat, smiling at the grieving mother of the woman you defrauded and saying he needs to move quickly as if you are simply a practical man helping with logistics. What he never accounted for was that she had raised me to pay attention, and that I had spent 31 years learning how to sit with hard things without looking away. I am not angry anymore, or not often. What I feel more is something harder to name. A kind of clear-eyed sorrow, maybe. Sorrow for Adrian, who deserved so much more time. Sorrow for Crispin, who had everything he needed and chose to take what wasn't his anyway, and lost everything for it. People who do what he did are not monsters with no inner life. They are people who stop tending to the parts of themselves that know right from wrong and let those parts go quiet. That kind of quiet is its own punishment, long before the law arrives. My daughter had integrity in the truest sense of the word. She was the same person in every room, whether anyone was watching or not. She found something that frightened her, and she handled it with honesty and precision and care. She thought about who might need to carry this after her. She thought about me. And I had to find something in myself too. I had to take 31 years of clinical steadiness and a lifetime of watching and listening and turn it toward the hardest thing I have ever done. Not because I am extraordinary, because she needed me to be enough. I think that is what we owe the people we love. Not perfection, not fearlessness, just the willingness to keep going when it would be easier to stop, to stay honest when dishonesty would be simpler, to use what we know, however quietly, in the service of what is right. That USB drive sat in a locked cabinet waiting for someone with the knowledge and the nerve to act on it. Adrian knew I would. That kind of faith is not something you earn in a moment. It is something you earn over a lifetime of small choices, of showing up, of telling the truth, of not looking away. She left me a letter that said, "You'll know what to do." I did. And that will be enough for the rest of my life.